for this gubernatorial forum that we have in store for you this evening. But I want to just be real with you for a second. We only have 90 minutes of these candidates' time this evening, so every break that we take for applause or an outburst or anything is just one fewer of the very tough questions, and many of them that we have prepared for tonight's forum. So I ask that you please hold your applause until the very end. That just allows us to get through more of the proceedings and hear more from these candidates. And to that end, I will say that because some of these questions are rather tough, some of these candidates might feel the desire to want to appeal to you to try and solicit applause from the crowd as a way to eat into their time that they will have to speak. Please deny them that opportunity so that they have to give more answers to our questions. Thank you very much. So candidates, with that, I will explain the rules for this evening's forum. We will begin with 2-minute opening statements, starting with former Lieutenant Governor Barnes and then coming down the row. You will have 2 minutes each. After those opening statements, we will then proceed to 5 topics of discussion that were arrived at with the consensus of an input from many of the workers here in this room. For each topic, we will begin with a lightning round, where you will use those yes-no placards that you had on your chairs when you sat down. I will read a series of yes or no questions. I just ask that you hold up clearly in front of you your answer to the question. It's just a way to give a very visual representation to the members of the audience of where you stand on some of the most important issues. After that, we will then give you a little free response portion where I will put a question to each of you. Sometimes the question will be the same for the entire group. Sometimes the question will be tailored specifically to you based on positions that you have taken in this campaign or former statements that you have made. Regardless of how the question is put to you, you will have 2 minutes to respond. Maddie Top from UFAS is sitting here in the front. She has some flags with her. She will be keeping time. When you have 30 seconds remaining, she will wave that flag in that same energetic motion that she is doing now. And that is your signal to start to wrap. When you hit your full time, she will ring a bell. If you can't hear that bell, Maddie also has, I'm not kidding, a cowbell next to her that she can also ring. But after your time has expired, we do have the ability to, you'll have a warning from me and then your microphone will be cut. Those are the rules for this evening's proceedings. So we will begin with opening statements, starting with Lieutenant Governor Barnes. And for your opening statements, I encourage you to include in your introductions a description of how you will make working people here in Wisconsin an active partner in your gubernatorial administration. Mr. Barnes, we start with you.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Mandela Barnes, former Lieutenant Governor. Really excited to be running to become the next governor of the state of Wisconsin. And I'd like to tell people that my start in public service started because of the attacks on collective bargaining rights for public sector employees. Now, I grew up in a union household. My dad was and still is a very active member of the UAW. In fact, the president of his retirees local. My mother was a public school teacher. You may have even seen the commercials. But I can tell you right now that if it were not for organized labor, wouldn't have had any of the chances, any of the opportunities that I've had in my life. Now, even before my parents, my grandfather moved to Milwaukee after his service in the Navy during World War II. He got a job as a union steelworker. He walked into A.O. Smith one day, walked out essentially 35, 40 years later. He was able to retire with relative comfort and dignity. He was able to create a middle-class foundation that I get to benefit from today. And as the proud product of Milwaukee Public Schools, my fight is to ensure that every single child growing up in the state of Wisconsin has at least the same opportunities that I've had. Now, throughout my entire career in public service, I've had the support of organized labor, spent 24 hours on the assembly floor debating right to work. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't a fight that we won, but it's a fight that I was proud to be a partner in. And I will continue the fight to ensure that workers in public sector and private sector have their voices heard, recognized, and most importantly, respected. Again, it's not that I would be running for office. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to school and make something of myself if it were not for organized labor, and I look forward to continuing the strong partnerships that we've always had.
Executive Crowley, please hold your applause, folks.
Can everybody hear me? All right, so good evening. My name is David Crowley. I serve as the county executive of Milwaukee County. I am a husband. I'm a girl dad ×3, and I like to joke that I am union made. My father was a retired master electrician, and my mother was a service industry worker for many decades. And so for me, it's really about giving back, right? And as county executive, I don't just talk about it, I'm actually doing the work and delivering results for workers within Milwaukee County. We have been able to expand paid family leave for folks who work within Milwaukee County, and not just full-time workers, part-time workers as well, and making sure that we bring their compensation up to actually compete with the private sector, making sure that Milwaukee County is just as competitive with any other organization that is out there. But it's extremely important that folks understand that if you're not on the table, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And our workers, our unions in the state of Wisconsin has not had a seat on the table for a few decades. And we know that it goes all the way back to the Walker era days when we need to actually get rid of many of these policies that he has placed on the books. It's not just about repealing right to work. There's more that we can do in the state legislature and as the next governor to making sure that we enshrine protections for workers all across the state of Wisconsin. So it's extremely important that as we continue to have these conversations that we also organize, right? Because it's not just about politics, it's about us as people making sure that workers not only have a seat at the table, but they have a strong voice in protecting themselves. And I truly believe in unions. Unions don't just support their members. They help the middle class across the entire state, across this country, when it comes down to their wages. And so I think it's extremely important that our unions have a seat at the table, our workers have a seat at the table, and we raise their voices just in general.
Representative Hong.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I have to say that, we are here because we are in a movement moment, and movements are powered by organized labor. And you deserve a governor, an executive who will be on the front lines, the picket lines with you. That is the type of partner I will be. I'm a proud daughter of immigrants. My parents are actually here tonight. I'm really excited because our first protest was the Act 10 protest. It's from my parents that I learned the value of hard work, of sacrifice, of service when it comes to building community and being a part of the collective first. I'm a proud single mom, a renter, and the working class champion that is fighting for working class people, not just for you right now, but alongside you. It is why being a community organizer is it's one of the parts of my identities and the work that I do that I'm most proud of. More and more people across this state are feeling left behind. They know that the working class folks have been abandoned, and instead we have a system that continues to be rigged for the billionaires, for the oligarchs, and we're seeing our taxes go to pay for their tax breaks. We're seeing our schools, our parks, our libraries, our community centers underfunded, while we're seeing the contracts go to private workers and corporations that won't pay their fair share. But this is a movement moment. And the more I talk to people across this state, the over 250 events that our campaign has done, we are hearing from workers, independent, Republican. Maybe they do not identify or have a political home right now, but they should have a home with unions, and I will be fighting to ensure that everyone has a right to a union and to collectively bargain in this state that I love so much. Thanks for being here.
Please hold your applause.
That was her mom.
Secretary Hughes.
That was her mom.
Even parents.
Good evening, everyone. Listen, first and foremost, your success depends on having a strong economy, making sure that everyone has the ability to have good-paying jobs, to be able to spend their money in their communities, support businesses in their community, is at the heart of my campaign and why I'm running for governor. I am so deeply committed to the concept of collective bargaining and the work that it means when people come together in order to be stronger together. I worked for 17 years for a cooperative. I was Organic Valley's general counsel, and I understand what it means for farmers to come together and say, we are going to work together to make us stronger, to fight against big ag, to fight against consolidation, and to be there together. As their lawyer, I understand what needs to happen in order to be able to protect those rights for collective bargaining, that we need to have Act 10 repealed, that we need to make sure we are putting things in place to protect the rights to organize and to come together. And as governor, that is work that I would be doing. And then bringing my expertise as the Secretary of Wisconsin Economic Development, again, creating jobs all across the state, understanding that we have to have a strong economy in every part of the state in in order for every Wisconsinite to have the opportunity to prosper. And I am able to demonstrate work that I've done in all 72 counties to support that economy, to keep us all at work, and to find those resources to be able to support healthcare, childcare, public schools. These are foundational to a strong economy and things that we need to do. But at its heart, I am a cooperative lawyer, and I understand the power of working together. I understand the power of 7 farmers who came together and built a company that now has 1,600 members. And I would do that work again and again to support you as you organize and come together and lock arms together. Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor Rodriguez.
Thank you so much for coming here and listening to us today. I'm a born and raised Wisconsinite. My mom grew up on a dairy farm in western Wisconsin and then became a teacher for teaching assistant for children with special needs and a proud union member. My father served in the Navy during Vietnam and then came back to fix telephones for Wisconsin Bell. We didn't have a lot growing up, but service to community was non-negotiable in my family. And so I took that with me into my adult life. I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Samoa in the South Pacific doing HIV/AIDS and reproductive health care work. And that set me on my pathway. I've been working in healthcare for over 30 years. I'm a nurse by background. I've done everything from night shifts in the emergency department all the way to running big public health programs. And that's what I thought I was going to do with my life, how I was going to serve my community. However, in 2020, with the chaos of the Trump administration and the misinformation and disinformation coming out of our leadership, I decided to run for assembly and was able to flip a district from red to blue in Waukesha County. I was so frustrated with that messaging because I had worked for the Centers for Disease Control. I am an epidemic intelligence service officer, did national and international outbreak investigations, and then stood up again when Governor Evers needed a partner for his second term and ran and won my primary statewide as lieutenant governor, and then again in the general at 3.5 percentage points, a landslide in the state of Wisconsin, as Governor Evers says. And I have been to all 72 counties every year that I have been lieutenant governor, and people are telling me the same thing, that they're doing everything right, but they're still feeling squeezed. And that's where labor comes in, is to be able to negotiate for wages, to negotiate for benefits. And I'm so proud to have the endorsement of AFSCME because they know that I'm going to put the labor movement first and workers' rights first.
Senator Roys.
Good evening. I'm State Senator Kelda Roys, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here alongside you, as I have been for my whole adult life. For over 25 years, I have worked as an advocate and an activist and a volunteer alongside you, working to elect Democrats statewide, turn Wisconsin blue, and turn progressive policies into law. I'm running for governor to raise wages, to lower costs, and to protect our freedoms from this dangerous authoritarian regime. These are not normal times. It's a pretty scary moment to be an American, and especially to be engaged in a visible activist movement like organized labor. But we need our progressive organizations, and especially labor unions, now more than ever, because that is how you resist authoritarianism. And in Wisconsin, we have been on the forefront of so many important movements, including the labor movement. And I know not only is our next governor going to need to stand up strong against the Trump administration and its many harms, but we're going to help be leaders in building what comes next. And that's what's really exciting to me, as someone who has spent my life working alongside you for that change. Now, I want to just tell you a little bit about who I am, for those of you who don't know the Kelda Roys 101. I was born in Marshfield. I spent my early years in rural Taylor County, north of Highway 29, where my family and I lived in a one-room schoolhouse, and we had a pet goat named Penelope. My dad was a union member, and so we grew up in a union household. Later, we moved to Madison, where I went to the University of Wisconsin Law School. I spent 4 years as executive director of NARAL Pro-Choice Wisconsin, fighting for our reproductive rights. 2 years in the assembly, 2 terms in the assembly, including during Act 10, where we helped fight against Scott Walker's attack on working people. I'm a small business owner for 13 years, and I've served in the state Senate since 2020. Most importantly, I'm a mom and stepmom of 5. I care deeply about Wisconsin's future, and we are going to raise wages, lower costs, especially on the big ticket items, and protect our freedom.
Thank you, candidates. I want to proceed to our first topic of this evening, which is going to be on Act 10 and its priorities. We will start with that lightning round. So if I could have you each pick up those dual-sided placards that you have there with the thumbs up or the thumbs down on them. And again, these will be yes or no questions. If you do not agree with a question in its entirety, we're all adults here. We recognize there are nuance on these issues. But please, if you do not agree with a question in its entirety, please answer in the negative. And this topic will really grow to encompass public sector workers more broadly, beyond Act 10. But we start with Act 10. Passed in 2011, Act 10 effectively outlawed most collective bargaining in the public sector, leading to a steep decline in public sector union membership over the last 15 years. Do you support repealing Act 10? I promise they get harder than that. Will you pressure university chancellors to meet and confer with campus labor groups over wages, benefits, and workplace conditions? Okay. Do you support following Illinois in allowing public workers to unionize by submitting signed union cards? This is also known as recognition via card check, rather than waiting for a workplace election. All right. We'll now go to our free response for this topic. You will have 2 minutes. These questions are tailored to each of you individually. We will start with Executive Crowley. Executive Crowley, you've called repealing Act 10 your first priority. The unions have told me in the preparation for this event that they want a governor who will be honest and direct with them about political realities. If there aren't pro-labor majorities in the legislature, how will you fight for Act 10's repeal?
I think that's a great question. As county executive, a lot of my success has been within divided government, with the Republican-controlled legislature. And so I don't believe just because the Democrats won't be in power that we should just stop the movement in making sure that we can unionize here in the state of Wisconsin. It's not just about repealing Act 10. Let's be very clear. There are laws that we need to put on the books to make sure that unions can continue to be strong and grow. Because even if today we repealed Act 10, the workers at the UW hospitals wouldn't be able to unionize even right now. And so we need to make sure that we are putting stronger laws in place, and we do that by organizing. You know, we're all running for governor, but we're also organizing different communities by going into Senate districts, going into assembly districts, talking about what matters most to us. And Act 10, giving people the ability to collectively bargain, has to be on the table. And so when we think about all of the voters that are out there, we know that this is top of mind. And I know that the political reality is that with the current makeup of the legislature, having a Robin Vos or a Devin Lemonhew, they have been stonewalling any type of progress here in the state of Wisconsin. But now we have fair maps, right? We also know that there's an opportunity for not only Democrats to get in control, but to make sure that possibly there's some level-headed Republicans who are also going to be there who believe in unions and believe in workers' ability to unionize. But I'm always going to make sure that the unions are at the table because they have a role to play when it comes down to the prosperity of every single worker here in the state of Wisconsin. And so, no matter where we are, we have to keep fighting. We cannot stop until the job is done.
What would organizing in a red district look like?
I think organizing in a red district is about speaking directly to the income inequality that we see across the entire state of Wisconsin. You know, when we think about retirement savings, 1 in 3 people have access to retirement savings through their employer here in the state of Wisconsin. And so there are ways that we can get people thinking a little bit differently, looking through a different lens when it comes down to the collectively bargaining, so they can see not only their wages rise, but they can see their costs come down, and they'll be able to afford a lot more things throughout the state.
Thank you. Representative Hong, you support a constitutional amendment to ensure a policy like Act 10 cannot become law again, but passing an amendment takes time. What are you prepared to do in terms of executive action as governor to support public sector workers' rights in the short term?
Well, there should always be a continuum of efforts to ensure that we are putting a stake in Act 10, which is why the constitutional amendment is what I support, and that would have to happen in 2 consecutive budget sessions, 2 consecutive assembly sessions. I think the additional executive actions we have to look at, regardless of the legislative makeup, where are the appointments? Who is being considered in terms of ensuring that they are supportive of including meet and confer? How can we be more supportive and be vocal? How can I be more vocal as an executive in terms of making things easier when it comes to open records requests of public sector workers? I think it's also going to be, I enjoy that there is a student representative on the Board of Regents, and I would like us to consider whose voices have not been considered before, who is going to be more forceful in ensuring that there are worker voices represented equitably on those appointments. And then I think going back to that first question, actually, when it comes to transparency with the status of where repealing Act 10 is, it's important that organizers on the ground know whether it's going to be potentially happening in the courts or through the legislature, and that we are continuing to build strategy and working every lane that we can to ensure that we're moving towards fully repealing that bill.
Okay. You're talking about diversity of appointments, would that include more appointments for folks who are actually in positions of corporate power right now? How many business executives should we expect as part of a Hong administration?
In terms of being appointed to the Board of Regents, or?
For example.
I think we have to look at what the current makeup is. What is the, what are some of the challenges facing where there have been missing voices? I don't think I could speak to a number of where there would be a business executive, a union representative, a student voice, an educator voice. So I think that will have to depend on where we are at when it comes to appointment time and what the makeup of the Senate looks like as well.
Secretary Hughes, you've centered your campaign on bolstering the Wisconsin economy, but your plans, at least on the economic side from what I could see on your website, make no reference to Act 10 and only scant mention of the public sector at all. Why should public sector workers feel that you are in their corner?
Well, I've been on the record for saying I would repeal Act 10. I apologize if it's not on my website. But as I've demonstrated and as I've talked about, I'm deeply committed to collective bargaining. When I talked to companies and worked with companies over the last 6 years as the Secretary of Economic Development, I did not have companies coming to me and saying they are not coming to Wisconsin, or they're excited to come to Wisconsin because of the right to work or because of Act 10. They actually are companies that were welcoming the opportunity to work with unions and understood that that would make them stronger. I never once had a company come to me and say, I'm coming to Wisconsin because of the right to work or because of Act 10. And I think it's important to think about how do we move the economy forward in partnership with companies and organizations that want to work with unions and make sure we're supporting collective bargaining. And when it comes to the public sector, you have seen, and I think we can absolutely demonstrate the decline that we have witnessed in Wisconsin because of Act 10, and we need to be able to demonstrate that by building that back up, by building up the opportunity for public sector workers to unionize, we will see results that help to lift our economy. So it is all part of the work of building a strong economy for the state.
How much of a strong economy is built on the back of the public sector?
Well, key to having a strong economy is having a strong healthcare system and a strong public school system. Those are foundational. And that's, I think, why we see struggles right now. We see people being held back because they are struggling with healthcare costs, with healthcare accessibility. And we also need to make sure that having strong public schools is going to benefit our economy into the future and in all of our communities. And so by making sure that we're supporting our public sector workers, we are strengthening those systems that are key to a strong economy.
Lieutenant Governor Rodriguez, Governor Evers has called special sessions of the legislature to consider many issues like gun control and police reform, but never Act 10. How would you, as governor, pressure the legislature to act on this issue?
So it's a great question about doing a special session for Act 10 because it does put folks on the record of where they stand in terms of workers' rights and bargaining rights. I am very optimistic that we are going to have majorities in the Assembly and the Senate, which means that we are going to be able to center workers in everything that we do. However, in case we do not, I have to be clear that not all union members are Democrats. And the reality is that there are many union members across the state that do not vote for Democrats, they vote for Republicans. And what I can do as governor is call that special session and then put pressure on those purple district or even red district Republicans who have a lot of union members in their districts to talk about who are they actually representing. Are they representing the everyday worker, which is what they say, or do they actually vote to make sure that union members have the ability to organize, that they have the ability to make sure that they get the right wages? And that's the kind of thing that you can do as governor if you do not have majorities in the Assembly and the Senate. Being in their backyard, making sure that we are really making it clear to voters who's on their side and who's not, so that the next time those purple district Republicans come up for election, their voters are going to know who they've actually supported through their time.
What would be the role of unions in that pressure campaign that you're talking about?
Yeah, I will work hand in hand with all of the unions to make sure that their individuals are contacting their representatives, that are contacting their senators, and making sure that they're telling them what they expect them to vote on. We know that union popularity now is around 70%. Again, not all Democrats. These are Republicans, these are independents that have a positive viewpoint of unionized labor. We need to make sure we capitalize on that and use that power to make sure that we hold our representatives accountable.
Senator Roys, you were in the Assembly prior to Act 10's passage when Democrats controlled both houses of the legislature, or both chambers, excuse me, and the governor's office, yet failed to proactively protect public sector workers from the onslaught of the Walker era that would follow. What lessons, if any, did you take from that time that you will apply as governor?
Yeah, my very first term in the state assembly was when Democrats had a trifecta, and it was our first trifecta in 24 years. And you may remember that we were in the midst of the Bush recession, and so the state budget did not have the capacity to absorb that economic shock. And so we had to do some incredibly difficult things, including make cuts to education and higher education, and furlough public workers. And I was the one who spoke out amongst several of us and said we should not be furloughing public workers. So I was a champion even then for our public sector workers and saying it is not right, for especially these lower paid workers that cannot afford to go several days without pay and just sitting at home. Then in 2011, when Scott Walker swept in and immediately did his attack on teachers with the help of Tom Tiffany, by the way, that was his first term in the state legislature, I was one of the legislators that moved my desk out onto the frozen ground. We had AFT phone banks running out of my office. I was in the Capitol day and night listening to testimony so we could keep that Capitol building open. I think we have a lot of power in the governor's office, and to address some of the questions that my colleagues have gotten, whether we have a Democratic trifecta or not, it's not magic. It's not puppies and rainbows. I was there when we had power. It is hard either way. But building a broader coalition gives us a better chance of success. Part of divide and conquer was attacking the public sector workers first, and then after that was done, it's attacking the private sector workers. I think we need to build a labor coalition solidarity, and let's take a page out of Minnesota's book too. Democratic Farm and Labor. We can build a broad coalition of people who want access to great health care, great retirement, paid family leave, and collective bargaining rights. And we can put that together, and we can use pressure tactics, of course, but there is a path here for us to be able to do this, and it will be my priority to raise wages, and part of that is restoring collective bargaining rights for public and private sector workers together.
Former Lieutenant Governor Barnes, aside from proposed state budgets quickly neutered by Republicans, Governor Evers did very little in his first term to erode Act 10. As Lieutenant Governor at the time, did you support his approach, and how, if at all, would your approach differ as governor?
Well, absolutely. I want to thank you so much. And if I can clarify one quick thing with a thumbs up, thumbs down. I never want to follow in the lead of Illinois, but I want to make sure we're doing the right thing for working people. And this is one of the differences. All due respect to the governor, it was a hostile legislature that held us up every step of the way, whether it was to provide opportunities for working people to collectively bargain, increase in the minimum wage, or even repealing prevailing wage, getting prevailing wage back on the books, I should say. It's just a difference in our approach. I mentioned my background for a reason. I talked about the household that I was born in for a reason. I remember my very first union interview when I ran for the state legislature. One of the questions was, how can we trust you? You answer the questions correctly. We've had a lot of people come in here and fall back on their words, and I said, well, I still have to go home at the end of the day. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, but if I go against the grain on this issue, I still got my dad to worry about. And this is the way I look at this, because I was out there during Act 10 in 2011. It's how I formed the relationships that I have right now. Many of those relationships still standing. In fact, it's the reason how I was able to build the coalition that got me elected to the state legislature in 2012. It's the reason why I ran. I see this as the work that has to happen as a result, or else all of that would have been for nothing. If we're not giving that collective bargaining opportunity back to public and private sector employees, then we aren't doing much. When I say I want every child in the state of Wisconsin to have at least the same opportunities that I had, again, it goes back to the fact that my parents were able to collectively bargain in their workplace alongside their coworkers.
Thank you. We're going to pivot to our second topic, I think, which will be right to work. And this will again grow to encompass really the private sector as a whole. So again, if I could have you grab those placards for a little lightning round here. And this one's a longer lightning round. Would you, as governor, stand on a picket line with striking workers? Okay. Have you ever been a member of a labor union? Thank you. Wisconsin's Act 1 of 2015 is popularly referred to by the misnomer right to work, but it allows workers to reap the benefits of a union contract without paying union dues. This legislation, along with Act 10, decimated Wisconsin's union membership and bargaining power over the past decade. Do you support repealing right to work? Do you support a minimum wage at or above $20 an hour? Okay. Do you support tying future minimum wage increases to inflation? Federal immigration agents have often targeted labor and community leaders. Would you direct state government agencies to not work with federal immigration authorities? Okay. Currently, workers earning as little as $36,000 per year are exempt from overtime pay requirements. Do you support increasing the salary threshold to be overtime exempt? Every year in the US, employers steal tens of billions of dollars in owed wages from their workers. Right now, this is treated as a civil offense. As governor, would you support criminalizing wage theft? Some of you have seen the questions in advance, apparently. Would you support establishing an office at the State Department of Justice specifically focused on investigating and prosecuting wage theft? A dozen states, including Minnesota and Illinois, have banned employers from forcing employees to attend mandatory anti-union meetings, known as captive audience meetings. Do you support outlawing captive audience meetings in Wisconsin? Okay. Yep. All right. This next question will be the same for each of you. We will begin with Representative Hong. And this, again, you can put those placards down. You'll have 2 minutes to respond to this. And I can repeat the question before you begin speaking if you need it. The status quo that existed before Act 1, or right to work, was not good for working people either. Union membership was declining and wages were stagnating. Aside from repealing right to work, that aside, we know you all want to do that. What would you do to ensure workers who want to organize can do so?
Think back to public education. It is right now in law that we have to teach labor history in our K-12 public schools, but that enforcement is very weak because we have been underfunding Department of Public Instruction for almost over a decade now. And I think it's important that we continue to push and educate young people on the power of joining a union, being in a union, and that comes with strong labor history. It's also imperative that we ensure that people are not punished or have their freedom of speech infringed upon for going to protest or speaking out at a political event and not have their rights be threatened in their workplace. You know, it also has to include ensuring that I think the state has a responsibility in helping organizing on the ground when it comes to increasing union membership. I think we need to look beyond more traditional grants or being at the picket lines, but what are grant programs to ensure that we are helping with training for Know Your Rights and legal observer training? What does it look like where organizers don't have to consistently try to fundraise themselves, where there are access to joining and building power for unions that are directly available from the state? I think it's important too that we, beyond increasing wages, how can we make sure that, especially in the age of AI, that workers are able to bring AI to the bargaining table, and that there is a cause of action where there are legal protections for workers as well?
You say bring AI to the bargaining table. I assume that you're speaking to wanting workers to be able to dictate AI policies within their workplace. Do I have you right?
Correct.
Okay. What would some of those restrictions to your mind look like? This is a brave new world for unions doing negotiations in this way right now, and how would the state support it?
Yeah, I'm really excited about our labor shift policy, in addition to Control Alt Delete, which are policies regarding the moratorium on an AI data center construction, as well as ensuring that we have protections and guardrails there. And then labor shift is to ensure that the workers have a voice at the table when it comes to AI policy in the workplace, including penalties for any company that may be receiving a tax exemption or a tax credit from the state, should there be layoffs due to use of AI over jobs, that there are ways that that company is responsible for upskill training and ensuring that there are new jobs created.
Thank you. Secretary Hughes?
Is there a chance you'd repeat the question?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The status quo that existed before right to work was not good for working people either, as wages stagnated and union membership declined. Aside from repealing right to work, what would you do to ensure workers who want to organize can do so?
So I believe that we have an opportunity to work with many companies that are already in Wisconsin that have union labor, and to help elevate those companies in our minds, in our work, to think about doing this from a positive perspective, rather than, of course, we need to protect the rights to organize, but also saying, look where it is happening. Look where there are successful companies that have union labor, that have partnered in a successful way, that work as partners, and say that is what we want to have in Wisconsin, and lay that out as that is our bar, where we expect companies to be working with unions to be partners there. We have many companies in Wisconsin that are European parents, that are German companies or French companies or Italian, who have unions in their operations in Europe and also here in Wisconsin. Let's celebrate that. Let's use that strength that we have to continue to say successful companies are companies that have unions. The same way we say successful companies are companies that have diverse boards, that have different perspectives. This is what we need to think about in Wisconsin. Those are the companies who we want to have as partners, not that we want to continue having divisiveness or pretending that this doesn't work. This works in companies that do it right, and it works when we have the opportunity for workers to organize. Of course, repealing the right to work is key to that. As I said, no companies are coming and saying, whoop, whoop, you guys are right to work, I want to be here. They're saying, I want to work with Wisconsin workers. I want Wisconsin workers because I know that they are the best workers in the world, and I want them to be partners in what we're doing. Those are the businesses that we want to work with and support, and that will also help to support workers' efforts to unionize and to organize.
Lieutenant Governor Rodriguez.
So this is a great question, and I think a lot of the things that we are talking about today does require majorities in the Assembly and the Senate to be able to pass some of these things. So some of the things that I would make sure that I am advocating for is that we can have automatic dues being taken out of paychecks, that unions can come into orientation sessions at work and they are not penalized for that they can talk about joining that union. So those are a couple things that we can do besides repealing Act 10. Making sure that we have very strong workers' rights. You talked about the type of things that we can do with the Department of Justice and to investigate folks who are doing wage theft. Another area that we see consistently across the state is that many companies sort of skirt the rules by having temporary employees. And I'm going to admit that the state does this as well. We have a lot of temporary employees at the state. So if we do not have a trifecta, there are things that the governor can do to make sure that we are at minimum bolstering the rights of state workers. And that includes making sure that we have labor and management boards in every single division. Every single secretary's office is going to have labor and management discussing issues. That we have independent ombudsmen if we have several different complaints within the state government, which we have seen before, that is investigated outside of that agency's rules so that we can have somebody independent going in there. I have committed to having labor representation within my executive office, and that when we are looking at who we're going to hire as secretaries, that is something that labor will have input on to make sure that we have people who have the right experience for the job. These are minimum things that we can do within the administration if we do not have majorities in the Assembly and the Senate. But let's encourage people within the state to actually join the union as opposed to making it something more quiet.
Thank you. Senator Roys.
The governor has a huge amount of power to set the tone, and as governor, I've committed that I will make it very clear to anyone who wants to be an appointee that they will need to act as if that they have collective bargaining rights. And that means regular meetings with their employees. That means making sure that they are fully committed to listening to the voices of frontline workers and to elevating their complaints. And a lot of the ideas that Sara had mentioned are also things that I've committed to. But more broadly, we need to crack down on independent contractor abuse. We need to restore prevailing wage so that even workers who may not be represented by a union can still benefit from higher wages. We need to restore the ability to have project labor agreements, because these are win-wins for taxpayers and municipal governments, as well as for workers. And most importantly, we need to raise the minimum wage. I am really proud to be the lead author of the living wage bill in the Senate that raises the minimum wage immediately to $15 an hour with a path to 20. We give small businesses a longer runway to get there, but we also raise the tip minimum wage and peg it to inflation. That's really important to me. This is something I've fought for many, many years. The last time we raised the minimum wage was in 2009. And ultimately, we want every single worker, whether you are in a union or not, to have the ability to have a good life. I also want to open up the state health care plan, and eventually I'd like to open up the state retirement plan to enable any worker or any union or entity to be able to buy in. The more money that we can save by covering more people with affordable, reasonably priced health insurance, the more money that can be put into wages. And we have to recognize that doing things so inefficiently in this country costs us all. If wages had kept up with inflation over the last 40 years, we'd all be making twice as much money as we are making now. So the affordability crisis is really driven by depressed wages.
Former Lieutenant Governor Barnes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one thing that needs to happen is that if you are not a union member, you shouldn't enjoy the benefits of a union contract. That's what happens far too often. If you haven't paid your union dues, you don't get the union contract, you don't get the union salary, you don't get the union benefits, plain and simple. Also, when you look at the onboarding process of any type of employment, where you get hired, the benefits of union membership should be very detailed and explained through HR. And also, in addition to making sure that we are ending the misclassification of workers, we need to look at the contracting that the state does. We should be contracting with those who engage in good faith with organized labor. This is a moment for us to make sure that we are the most pro-worker, pro-union state in the entire country. And as many people have mentioned, the declining union participation due to the attacks on collective bargaining has led to a decline in the middle class. The way we build our economy from the middle class out is ensuring that we have strong unions. You all know it. I'm preaching to the choir, but we are in a church. But it's for the folks who are not necessarily in here right now, who don't always know the benefits of union membership. There are a lot of people who are under the wrong impression about what unions stand for and what union benefits actually mean. They've been sold a bill of goods. They've been told lies by executives and corporations, and they have been led to believe that unions are bad for them and their way of life, when in fact, it's those same executives, those same CEOs, the same people who send our good-paying American jobs to other countries who make out like bandits. And some of the other questions about, union politics and, the things that come up about whether it's Democrats or Republicans, it's not always left and right. It's top and bottom. The people who've made out like bandits and everybody else who's left scrambling for crumbs.
Thank you very much. Executive Crowley.
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely, I can. Aside from repealing right to work, what would you do to ensure workers who want to organize can do so?
I think this is a great question because, one, it recognizes that even before the Walker-era policies, the state of Wisconsin was not the strongest union place. And there's so much more that we can do. It's not just about repealing Act 10. It's about working with the state legislature to put stronger protections in place when it comes to our state statutes. It's not just making sure that we protect collectively bargain, but I truly believe that we need workers' rights, worker protections within our state statutes and within our state laws. But I would even go a step further and say that we need to, as Representative Hong has stated as well, we need to enshrine this into our state constitution. We need to make sure that we are protecting unions' ability to collectively bargain and protecting all workers across the entire state of Wisconsin. And this is something I've been on the front lines for a very long time. You know, I mentioned my dad being a master electrician, but I was also an organizer during Act 10, organizing the different Senate candidates to make sure that we're actually replacing them. And where we are right now, right, if we can't change the minds of the individuals who are in these seats today, then it's time for us to organize and change the faces of those individuals. And so this is going to take everybody coming to the table to make sure that this can really happen. But we have to have stronger laws in place and hopefully a constitutional amendment that really protects people's ability to collectively bargain.
Without state intervention, though, right now the federal government and its private sector labor resolution dispute through the National Labor Relations Board, we're really just at the mercy of the Trump administration with labor relations here in the state of Wisconsin. So would you put any kind of framework in place for there to be private employer arbitration, anything like that that would force companies to come and actually bargain in good faith with their workers?
Oh, absolutely. I think the one thing that I think we've all learned about the Trump administration is that we just can't sit there and lay there. We all have to continuously fight back. And it doesn't matter how long we're going to be fighting back because we're not just fighting for this generation, we're fighting for the next generation as well.
But what does that look like, though?
You say, what does it
look like? What does it look like? What does the state apparatus look like that would arbitrate and pressure private employers?
Well, I think it's really about setting an expectation, right? I think with you being a governor, you know, many of the conversations that we've been having already is just related to how state employees are going to benefit. But it's about the masses. It's about local units of government. It's about private entities. And so this is about how do we put in place not just agency heads, but the governor, but again, the people as a whole. Because once we stand up as workers, these private entities, these CEOs will have to actually turn around and speak directly to the people.
Thank you, candidates. I appreciate that. We're going to move on to our next topic, which is affordable health care. So if I could again get you to pick up those placards, we'll start with our lightning round. Act 10. Oh, and before I even introduce this question, I want to acknowledge that in preparation for this, what a lot of the workers communicated to myself and to the committee that was planning this event was that healthcare, while it is an important service that many people need to interact with, it is also labor for many of the people likely in this room. So we want to start there with healthcare as labor. Act 10 bars UW Health nurses from collectively bargaining. Would you sign a bill that granted these nurses collective bargaining rights? Okay. Unionizing nurses at SSM Health St. Mary's Hospital here in Madison allege that management has threatened them with reprisal for wearing union buttons, union badge holders. As governor, would you use your office to apply pressure to employers who engage in union busting? Post-pandemic, there has been a shortage of nurses and healthcare workers. Are you in favor of public policy incentives of any form to hire and retain more people in this field? Would you support expanding Medicaid to cover more Wisconsinites? Thank you. This question, again, is for everyone. We will begin with Secretary Hughes, and this is free response, so you can put those placards down. Secretary Hughes, all of you, and to note here for the audience, the candidates were given this question in advance so that they could prepare and do a little homework here. All of you support a public option in some way as a form to expand access to health care. How does your health care plan differ from those offered by your opponents?
My healthcare plan does offer a public option. It also includes the opportunity to cap prescription drug costs for chronic drugs and to consider importing prescription drugs which is something we see other states doing in order to cap those costs. It also really addresses access and making sure that across the state, Wisconsinites have the opportunity to access both mental health care needs, physical health care needs, and something that we're really seeing across the state in rural areas is EMS and emergency services, and making sure that those are available. I think where I differ from my colleagues on that is really rolling up our sleeves and doing a regional look at what needs to happen in each part of the state. I supported a program out of the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire to help with rural healthcare workers and make sure that we're providing the training and the support needed for rural healthcare workers, which can be remarkably different, obviously, than what's happening in our urban centers. Finally, I'm really focused on making sure that we're improving healthcare overall, and we're thinking about how do we make the experience better. And there's organizations at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, with our government and with our companies that are working together to really think about how do we change the game for healthcare. And there's incredible things happening in biohealth in Wisconsin, and I was able to support the creation of the Regional Biohealth Tech Hub to help support that really game-changing research that's happening, that happens at our university, goes to our companies, goes to our hospitals, comes back to the university. This is the kind of work that we can be doing to really innovate healthcare in Wisconsin.
Lieutenant Governor Rodriguez.
So I could probably talk about healthcare policy till your ears fell off. I have been in healthcare for over 3 decades, and I'm the only one on this stage that has truly had firsthand experience working within a healthcare system. I still remember the panic in the pit of my stomach in the ER when one more patient was wheeled in and I wasn't sure that I could give them the care that they deserved. And so this is personal for me. So my plan is a public option on the exchange. It is built off of Colorado's model, which requires a 5% reduction in premiums each year, with some price transparency along with that. And I chose that model because I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. Let's already pick something that we know has lowered costs across the state, and Colorado has proven that. Also, expansion of Medicaid. It is going to be more difficult in terms of expansion of Medicaid because of what happened within the federal bill. I still think it's the right thing to do, and I still think we can put things around it to make sure that we can lower those costs within that expansion population. I've also included a rural health stabilization fund. We know that the cuts that are coming to Medicaid and Medicare are going to hit our rural spaces way harder than our urban and suburban spaces. We are looking at hospitals closing all across the state. If we do not have a Band-Aid to fix what Trump and Tiffany have broken, we are going to have hospitals that are no longer going to be able to provide services. So that is different than everybody else's. Lastly, there's a healthcare Bill of Rights that we will pass legislation to make sure that we enshrine some of the things that were with the Affordable Care Act, including making sure pre-existing conditions are covered, making sure that there are no caps on the amount of money that you can spend within your health insurance, making sure that we have preventive care and that it is of no cost to the consumer. That's different than the rest of the folks on the table, but I'm also was the chair of the Healthcare Workforce Task Force, and there are significant interventions that we can also do for the healthcare workforce as well.
Thank you. Senator.
In 2009, I was the chair of the Assembly, or vice chair of the Assembly Committee on Health. And we had the opportunity to expand Badger Care to 80,000 previously uninsured Wisconsinites. And as somebody who knows what it is like to go without health insurance, I know that that is life-changing. And ever since then, I have fought hard for Medicaid expansion. We should have done it every single year, and every single year the Republicans said no. Unfortunately, a horrible thing happened last year, which was the passage of that big ugly bill. Remember Trump's federal budget with Tom Tiffany's help? And what that did to the states that had not expanded Medicaid, like Wisconsin, is functionally take it off the table, not just financially, but with policy changes. And that is a hard pill to swallow. But I think it is very important that we not pretend that we're in a different world than the one that we're actually in. Healthcare is too urgent of a problem to say, okay, we've been talking about Medicaid expansion for 16 years, I'm just gonna coast on this one and hope the voters don't look at the details. We need a plan that is Trump-proof and built for Wisconsin, that takes what is working about Wisconsin's healthcare and makes it better. Walker and the Republicans want to divide and conquer. Look at the great health insurance that public employees enjoy. Let's rip it away. Democrats take a different approach. If something is working well, we want everyone to have access to it. My plan will open up the state health insurance pool that state employees get to participate in and will allow anyone to buy in. So unions, municipalities, school districts, small businesses, big businesses, and individuals. Of course, we need a public option for Badger Care. If we can get permission from the Trump administration, I'm all for it. I hope there will be a day that we can expand Medicaid again in Wisconsin, because we should absolutely do it. But until then, we have to do something different that will help lower costs immediately, that will keep rural hospitals and clinics open, and that will get us closer, faster to our ultimate goal, which should absolutely be universal healthcare coverage for all. Healthcare is a right, and in the richest country in the world, we should act like it.
Thank you. Former Lieutenant Governor Barnes.
Yeah, thank you. So I actually do have some experience in the healthcare industry, and it's unfortunately like so many others, and that's having carried medical debt. And that should not be a reality in this state, shouldn't be a reality in this country. As mentioned, the most wealthy nation to ever exist, a place where we are on track to see the world's first trillionaire. In that reality, it is shameful that people can continue to rack up medical debt. And I still believe that expansion of Badger Care is a reality, although it will be a little bit more difficult. It is a necessary first step for us as a state. So many folks are going without. You hear healthcare horror stories every single day, people who've gotten letters informing them about how much their health insurance premiums are set to increase. And these folks are ripping up those letters, and they're going without health insurance, quite literally gambling with their health care. And if you can't afford health insurance premiums, then chances are you are absolutely not going to be able to afford an emergency. So expansion of of Badger Care is of primary concern in creating that public option so people can buy into. If you're starting a business, if you're in between jobs, if you're in the gig economy. We also have to look at that issue of medical debt as a state. Some other places have looked towards these examples of states buying up medical debt because, again, if a person is saddled with this debt, it goes to collections, they're not able to pay their bills. A lot of folks are going to find themselves out of their apartment, out of their homes, not able to afford basic necessities. That makes us less stable as a state if people aren't able to meet their basic needs. That means there are going to be a lot of other gaps that the state is going to have to step in to fill. So I think it is financially responsible for us to look at the option of potentially buying up medical debt.
Is it financially responsible for the state of Wisconsin to be buying up medical debt?
Yeah, so that's the conversation. If we have folks who are, facing impending financial crisis, if they're staring down foreclosure, if they're staring down being potentially evicted from their homes, that creates an additional cost, not just for them as individuals, but it creates additional costs for us as a state as well.
Okay. Executive Crowley.
Yeah, my plan is to expand Badger Care. And as someone who has been on Badger Care, I think it's extremely important that those who are uninsured have the ability to have some type of health care. I mean, if we're going to be making decisions based off of what Donald Trump has done, I'm gonna knock on wood because he's not gonna be there forever, right? And so as Democrats, we can't continue to just react to what Donald Trump is doing, because if we do, he is defining us for us instead of us actually being on the offense to actually score. And so the difference between my plan is really not just about expansion, but it's also about increasing the reimbursement rates, right? And increasing the reimbursement rates, we have personal care workers who are struggling every single day, taking care of people, and they can't even put food on their table, be able to afford their own rent. And so we have to increase that reimbursement. But also by increasing that reimbursement, it gives us the ability for us to create parity, right? It's not just about physical health. It's about your mental health. So it would cover any mental health services that you may need, as well as dental, as well as vision. And this will make sure that we are creating a blanket across the entire state of Wisconsin so people can actually get access to the care that they need without having to travel 1 to 2 hours away just to be able to see a doctor. And this is near and dear to me because I just recently, 3 years ago, lost my mother to kidney failure. And I used to talk to her about her going to pain management. They weren't taking care of her, they were just managing her pain. They was giving her all these drugs, right, which did not help her with her kidneys. So we have to make sure that with the system that we're putting in place, that we're doing everything that we can to be as proactive as possible, because I don't want anybody going to the emergency room. I want you to be able to see a doctor to where we are investing more in preventative care versus crisis care.
Representative Hong.
Healthcare is a catastrophe in this country, and it is a cold war between hospitals and insurance companies, and we as consumers who should have a right to healthcare are unfortunately at its peril. We have to control and regulate both healthcare prices in order to have lower healthcare costs. And so my plan does include the expansion of Badger Care, which is an absolute necessity. We have a partial expansion plan right now. We don't have that one-time Biden reimbursement, but because of the situation of healthcare in this crisis in our state, we have to explore every single option and try to pilot every single thing. So I think it would be deeply irresponsible to ignore expanding Medicaid. Of course, there will be additional costs that come with administering it, but the state has a responsibility to then put in regulatory practices as well, crack down on claim denials. We are looking at pre-authorization care. I get so worked up about healthcare and see what's happening. That we have to look at where the tax exemptions are going for both for-profit and not-profit hospitals, that when we are looking at reimbursements, that when there are hospitals charging 3-4 times what that they are getting reimbursed for Medicare, that if there are exemptions that are not being responsibly invested back into care, especially rural care, that the state has a responsibility to look at different regulations. I think it has to be a crackdown on capping on hospital corporate profits, looking at insurance company claim denials, working with the Attorney General's office on that, making sure that we are invested in a public option, expanding basic health plans. And the public option here is incredibly important because there are going to be eligibility flexibility that we can implement with a public option plan for folks who may not be able to qualify for Medicaid any longer.
Thank you, candidates. And I just want to note, if there are any more technical difficulties like that, I was watching our timekeeper, Maddie Top, very diligently pause and unpause the time whenever your mic was working. So we will be giving you your time regardless. Don't worry, we won't sacrifice it for technical difficulties. So we're going to move on to the next topic. So again, please pick up those placards. We're going to move on to AI and outsourcing. And for our lightning round, we begin with, do you support the state proactively regulating how AI is implemented in the workplace? Would you support a law requiring a human be the final decision maker on any workplace policy that may affect employees and their employment status? Would you support a law requiring employers to disclose when they are using an AI system to monitor employees? Do you support a 1-year or longer moratorium on data center construction in Wisconsin? Right, thank you. Right now, companies can and do require local leaders to sign non-disclosure agreements that prevent community members from learning about potential economic development projects like data centers. Would you sign legislation banning this practice? Do you support requiring utility rate increases tied to data center construction be passed primarily onto the data centers themselves? All right, we'll next go to individual questions. These are tailored specifically to you. And we'll begin with Lieutenant Governor Sara Rodriguez. Your campaign says that you want more local control over data center projects, but local leaders are often desperate to accept these projects. Data centers promise more jobs and tax base for cash-strapped communities. How can communities be expected to make logical decisions if given local control while they are desperate for these corporate developers in the short term?
I appreciate this question. I wanted to be clear on what my stance is on data centers, that we do need a floor for regulation within the state, and that includes having community benefit agreements, which includes community input of whether or not a data center be put in that community, because right now people are finding out after the ink's already been signed. Number 2, they need to pay enhanced energy rates, because they have to pay not just for the energy that they're using, but the transmission lines into the data center as well as maintenance on the grid. and they have to invest in renewables in the state. You want to build here, you've got to invest in Wisconsin. And if they use any water, we need to know how much, and if they're putting it into their system and out of the system, it needs to be at the same temperature and quality as they put it in. So that's the floor, and communities can have higher regulations if they so choose, or can say not in my backyard. One of the reasons why communities are so desperate for these things is because we have underfunded our communities for over a decade. You can probably ask County Executive Crowley that same question. Our formula for how we fund our communities, it's basically your tax dollars, you send them into the state, we package them up and give them back to your communities. We fix it around the edges a little bit a couple of sessions ago, but it has truly not been looked at in decades. And this means, this is why we have the top 10 property taxes in the country, is because we have to raise property taxes for our schools to be able to keep the lights on, and we need to raise property tax, municipalities need to raise property taxes to pay for basic necessities like EMS, road construction, keeping their libraries open, their parks clean. We need to make sure that we fix that formula so that communities have the dollars that they need to be able to provide those basic services of community, so that they do not feel desperate and wanting to have a data center come into their community.
Thank you. Senator Roys, you've said that to protect workers, you want the state government to always be part of negotiations with data center developers over new projects. How will the state being involved in negotiations protect jobs from automation if the data centers themselves still end up getting built at the end of the day?
Well, I want to be very clear that I support very strong state safeguards that protect workers, that protect our environment, that have meaningful local control, that put local communities, not just where the data center is located, but surrounding communities, in the driver's seat, and put them in the strongest possible bargaining position to say yes, no, hell no, or not like this. And we need protections for ratepayers, not just that they pay primarily the same rate or whatever that word was, but that they pay all the cost and they pay enhanced rates so that they're actually giving money to us. I think one of the big problems that we have is that you've got these extremely well-paid fancy lawyers that do this all day long, and they come into these communities who have been starved of resources by Republicans for 30 years, and they dangle a bag of money, and they just get rolled. So I want the state to have a sophisticated negotiating team that would go voluntarily, if the community wants, to have some support to actually be able to help that community meet its needs. Now, the other big idea that I have about data center development is we should require a big upfront payment on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars that we will use to capitalize a public infrastructure bank. And then we can use that money and lend it out at zero cost to municipalities, to school districts, to enable the kind of clean energy infrastructure development that's totally out of reach for our cash-strapped municipalities and school districts. If we want to have a clean energy economy where we are completely decarbonized by 2050 and running on clean renewable energy, this is going to help us get there. And to me, there is broad political support amongst Democrats and even some Republicans for responsible regulation. Let's put our energy into the policy that we actually want, that prevents the kind of reckless, outrageous data center development that we have seen. That's how we should put our energy in this, and I think that's going to give us a better outcome.
All right. Former Lieutenant Governor Barnes, the Daily Cardinal reports that you feel data centers can benefit Wisconsin if done right. Right now, Wisconsinites are reporting water, light, and noise pollution from data center projects, in addition to the fears about losing their jobs to AI. What does a data center done right look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And given the examples that you just mentioned, they aren't doing things right. I haven't been in a lot of rooms where people were happy about data centers, and that's the problem. That's why a state like Wisconsin needs to be out front. We need to have guardrails in place first and foremost, as we all mentioned. We're all at least put our thumbs up to making sure that there are no secrecy deals, no non-disclosure agreements. We also have to make sure that rates aren't going up for ratepayers and that the water use, as was just mentioned there's no impact on water quality or air quality. And there also has to be a renewable energy component as well so that they are putting energy back on the grid. There's so many concerns that folks have brought up. You mentioned water again, even the wells dried up. There's stories about 15-degree temperature differentials outside of data centers. This is all unacceptable. And my stance is if they can be done right, if they can meet the metrics, if they can answer to the public and do things in a way that does not impact quality of life for people, light pollution, sound pollution, all these other issues, then we can have that conversation. All we're asking them to do is be good neighbors, just like any other industry, whether it's a data center or a retail store. If you're gonna be in a community, you should do right by the people within that community and address those concerns. And if those concerns aren't addressed, then unfortunately there's not a place for them.
With you listing all of those different problems, I mean, a lot of it comes down to just the scale of these projects. So then if you're talking about it done right, are you talking about capping the scale of economic development projects? Or how would you try to actually get to a place where these concerns aren't being felt in all of these communities?
For sure, scale can be a part of that equation. Like I said, I don't have the answer right now. That's why I want to make sure that we have a comprehensive framework that comes from study. There's been a number of, there was a study that came out from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Melissa Scanlon, she put out there. I had a chance to work with her at Midwest Environmental Advocates, and they have the right ideas out there about what we should be doing in terms of putting these guardrails in place to make sure that Wisconsinites are protected, that our natural resources are not being taken advantage of as well.
Executive Crowley, you've said that Wisconsin should be fertile ground for entrepreneurs and not discourage data centers. To what extent do you worry that puts Wisconsin into a race to the bottom with other states offering the most tax giveaways to try and bring in these data center developers?
Wait, repeat that question?
I'm asking if you are concerned that in trying to keep Wisconsin open for business to data centers and to entrepreneurs in general, if that brings Wisconsin into a race to the bottom in terms of tax giveaways to these companies to attract them here as opposed to going to other states.
Well, I think that just because you're in favor of economic development doesn't mean that you shouldn't put strict regulations on these data centers. Let's be very clear about that. And I know that when it comes down to a moratorium, I had a thumbs down. The reason is because we're going to put a moratorium in January. What's happening with the data centers between now and then, right? And so I think when it comes down to these data centers, we should be putting in the most strict regulations possible to set the bar of what states should be doing across the entire country. I mean, we should all be upset that the state legislature left session without actually putting guardrails in place. Now, my fear is that with this, without having a framework, these data centers can go to Minnesota, they can go to Michigan, they can go to Illinois. But the problem is that our clean water, our clean air doesn't stop at the border of Wisconsin. And so I truly believe that we have to put the most strict standards in place, 100% for the cost to any energy upgrades when it comes down to the grid, but also I think they not only pay for 100% of their energy, but they should be subsidizing all of our energy across the entire state of Wisconsin. There should be community benefits, not just in the communities that they're in, but for the entire state of Wisconsin. And if they are going to be here, I do think that we have a responsibility as state leaders or as the next governor in making sure that we can get a piece of those data centers to leverage for our school systems, to leverage for our small businesses here, leverage for anything and everything that we believe is going to move us forward. But I do not believe that by just saying no without having a framework, we're doing ourselves a favor, because they're going to go somewhere else and it's still going to affect our quality of life.
But the question was about tax incentives. Is there a limit to what the state should be giving away, and if so, what is that?
I think there should always be a limit on tax incentives. If that's
yeah. So what is that red line?
What is the red line?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's on a case-by-case basis, because it depends on the types of business, right? I can't treat a small business like a large corporation as it relates to the amount of the dollars, right? And so this is about how many workers are actually going to work in these places, right? Yes, we know that data centers can employ a lot of people on the front end, but at the end of the day, it's not a lot of people who are working inside those data centers. And so when we talk about tax incentives, we need to be looking at the end-use jobs, not necessarily just the front jobs.
Thank you. Representative Hong, you've called for a moratorium on data center construction in Wisconsin, but that won't stop the AI build-out in the rest of the country. Wisconsin workers might still lose their jobs to AI, and union construction workers here in Wisconsin would also lose out on potential work on data center projects. How would you balance protecting Wisconsin workers in the short and long term?
The moratorium that we proposed would be for the construction of new AI data centers. I think that there would need to be conversations between the local governments, the developers, and the state on the existing ones should the moratorium bill pass, which I will continue to push for. You mentioned when we first began this conversation about promises, and I think that it would be fiscally irresponsible for the state to do business with big tech oligarchs that are coming in, working with developers, and expecting us to be wooed by any sort of local, immediate or long-term investment that is a promise. We were Foxconned once, and I think that we need continued investment in ensuring that we have fair, equitable shared revenue system to ensure that our local governments have their fair share of revenue so that they are not reliant on basically having less community control and less community say on the economic development that happens in their yard. There is a moratorium bill that has been introduced by Senator Sanders and Representative Ocasio-Cortez. I know that the public opinion, the public discourse is finally being listened to, and the state has a responsibility to actually meet the public where they are at when it comes to the construction of these centers. We need to ensure that the centers that will be built or currently being built must be union jobs, and then incentivize fair labor contracts and making sure that our union workers are building clean energy infrastructure, schools, community centers, hospitals. The data centers currently in Wisconsin, they have sales and tax use exemptions. We have lost hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue that we could have been getting from these from these centers that we haven't been for the last 2 years. The moratorium is to ensure that we can have a regulatory framework. The moratorium is to ensure that there can be local control. And this moratorium is actually an opportunity for the rest of, I think, the elected officials to be able to respond to where the public is at when it comes to our natural resources are not.
Thank you, Representative Hong. Your time is up. Secretary Hughes, while you were CEO of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, WEDC published a webpage advertising tax incentives for data center developers who build in Wisconsin. Now, you didn't set the policy, but still it would have been your job to advertise and talk to corporate developers about what Wisconsin had to offer. And at a previous candidate forum, you said that we need to have a plan for how to decommission data centers if they become obsolete. How much should the state be subsidizing technology you are already concerned could soon become obsolete?
How much should the state be?
How much should the state be subsidizing through tax incentives, should be subsidizing these projects when you're already concerned? You've said in the past that you're already concerned or considering about how these things should be decommissioned.
Well, I'm saying that as opposed to past investments that have been made, say, in auto plants or things like that, we need to learn those lessons and be as smart as we can to anticipate, not just think about what are the challenges today, which of course includes protecting our environment, protecting ratepayers, and making sure that union workers have the opportunities to build these facilities and to build the renewable energy associated. But how can we be as smart as possible to think into the future and say, okay, we are dealing with companies that have unlimited amounts of resources. So let's make sure that we're not only thinking about how we protect today, but how we protect tomorrow. And again, as you look into what we can learn from our friends in Europe, as they're building buildings, they are also thinking about how those buildings are taken down, how the materials are recycled. We have so much opportunity to be smarter than just seeing what's right in front of us, but thinking about into the future, what do we want to have established here? And that's where I think the state can bring in regulation, the state can make sure there are funds for things like decommissioning, for thinking about supporting green energy, for making sure that, for the sales tax exemptions that these companies have, they're also contributing back to Knowles Nelson, or what else can we be doing to say to them, if you want to be here, if you want to be partners in Wisconsin, and we should be saying this to any company, what are you going to be doing to work with us and thinking about our future and our resources?
Thank you very much. We're going to turn to our final topic for this evening, which is on education in charter schools. If you could pick up your placards one final time. Do you agree that Wisconsin's public education system is dramatically underfunded? Thank you. Do you support fully ending Wisconsin's private school voucher program? Fully ending the private school voucher program. Thank you. Do you commit to restoring the state's 2/3 public school funding obligation within your first term? Thank you. Do you support restricting public charter school authorization exclusively to local public school boards, meaning only public school boards could approve new charter schools? This question is for everyone again. We will begin with Senator Roys. What is your top priority for education in Wisconsin? Oh, and I should probably preface this one. The unions repeatedly in the preparation for this event told me that they are, while they're going to fight like hell for pro-labor majorities in the legislature, they want to back somebody for governor who is thinking critically about how they're going to govern if they don't have those pro-labor majorities. So with that in mind, what is your top priority for education in Wisconsin, and how would you, as governor, manage forces like the voucher lobby and an adversarial legislature to achieve your education priorities?
Wisconsin should be the very best place to raise a child. And we can't do that unless we are the education state once again. My family moved here. My parents moved from other parts of the country, and they settled in rural northern Wisconsin because of the quality of the public schools. And then they later moved to Madison. Can you imagine a family today making that same decision? As a parent, I can see that what my kids and stepkids got and are getting is not the same as what I got, and it's not okay with me. And I am really proud to have earned the trust and the endorsement of WEAC, the state's teachers union, our state's foremost labor champions for kids, alongside, of course, AFT, which I hope to earn their endorsement. We need a governor who is willing to use political power to meet this moment. We can't wait for 2 years or 4 years to see if we pick up more seats. That's a fool's errand. We have to do everything we can to make sure that public education will finally be a priority in this state. We have had 8 Republican budgets in a row that have defunded public education, and we all feel it in our classrooms. Of course, money is not the only thing our kids need to succeed, right? We need high standards. We want to have accountability. We want evidence-based learning. We have got to get the distractions out of the classroom, and we need to restore collective bargaining rights so that teachers can be treated like the professionals that they are. But you can't have great schools without money. And that means revising our state funding formula so that schools are more equitably funding. It means fully funding the state's share so we take the pressure off the property taxes permanently. And it means bringing this voucher scheme to a responsible close over time, not overnight, but yes, public dollars should be for public education, period. And when I say public education, I mean early childhood, K-12, and public higher ed, our technical colleges and universities. I will be a real education governor for this state.
Former Lieutenant Governor Barnes.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a proud product of Milwaukee Public Schools, I know exactly what public schools offer to students. I wouldn't have the worldview that I have. I wouldn't have my understanding of how societies actually function. To that point, unfortunately, there were a lot of folks who I went to school with whose lives turned out drastically different than mine. Our lives took different paths. But ultimately, that was a result of what good fortune I had when I left the school building. I never had to worry about where my next meal was going to come from, didn't have to worry about where I was going to sleep the next night. My parents weren't rich by any means. They still struggled to pay the bills, but comparatively speaking, as it related to some of my peers, that was essentially a luxury. And it put so many of our students on the back burner, the living situations. When I was in the legislature, 1 out of 19 students in Milwaukee Public Schools was homeless. That was the statistic. That means over 5% of the student population that shows up at a significant disadvantage. And you cannot expect a student who has to worry about housing as a child. There's no child who can determine their own housing. If you have to deal with that And if you're dealing with that, you're dealing with so many other issues like lack of access to healthcare, mental and physical. If these are the burdens that are already placed on our students, you can't compare them to students in wealthier school districts, and that's why you see better outcomes. I tell people all the time, there's no such thing as a failing school, just a failed community. And that's why I supported community schools legislation to make sure that all of our children are showing up to learn on level playing field. That is the most important thing we can do to shift the paradigm in education, to create some balance, and to make sure that our students are set up for success when they show up to school and that they can have that education reinforced when they go home at night.
Executive Crowley.
I think that first and foremost, we need to get back to the 2/3 funding formula and fully fund the special education gap. And even if you don't have a Democratic majority, there's a way of having this conversation to actually lower property taxes for local communities because the state is actually filling the school funding formula the way it needs to be. And let's be very clear, we need to make sure it's actually going back to the schools and not going back to the school property tax credit because that is not reaching our kids. And so I truly believe that we can do that no matter what the legislature looks like. But I also want to go back to a nuanced question that was asked related to the voucher system. You know, I'm the county executive of Milwaukee County. The largest public school system in the state is Milwaukee Public Schools. What many people may not know that 50% of the children within the city of Milwaukee are actually within the voucher system. And so we have to ask ourselves, if we were to end that system today, what would we do to some of the public schools across the entire state that doesn't have enough resources to teach the current capacity of students that they currently have? We have to strengthen our public schools right now to make sure it is the place of choice for all of our parents across the entire state of Wisconsin. And in the meantime, we need to make sure that all of these other systems, they're held accountable, that they're transparent, and that they're held at the exact same standards of our public schools across the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you very much. Representative Hong.
Public education is one of the last remaining democratic institutions. It is why for decades under Republican or Democratic leadership that we have seen a push towards privatization and honestly a neglect of what is here in Wisconsin a constitutional right. And so
Representative Hong, we'll have you hold for just a moment. We're rushing in another microphone, so we can't be accused of bias here.
Left is when it go out.
the left, so I just keep turning
If
right.
you do that, you'll be
okay.
all right.
I feel solid about this now. Okay. I'm just going to talk to you, David. So if we want to have a strong democracy, we have to fully fund public education. And the priority, regardless of the makeup of the legislature, has to be 90% special education reimbursement at some sufficient and healthy school meals for all. We've already seen from this past session that there is some appetite from Republicans to fund special education. And I think it's important that the executive go in and set the vision, the goal, what we can really achieve and what we know our kids deserve. Right now, we are abdicating our constitutional responsibility to ensure that we are funding all kids so that all kids have a sound and basic public education. And healthy school meals for all, because I get this question a lot, being the Democratic Socialist, how are you going to pay for it? Well, it turns out eliminating the manufacturers and agricultural tax credit can save us over $400 million a session, and that'll be able to fund at least 2 years of healthy school meals for all, regardless of if your child goes to a public, private school for the visually impaired. Our kids deserve better. One of the most important critical investments we have to do and prioritize is to ensure that all kids are healthy, all kids are fed, and all kids have a great education.
Thank you very much. Secretary Hughes.
So you might have noticed that for the voucher question, I said no. And that's because as governor, I want to be really, really realistic about what we can get done and what fights we pick. I don't want to pick the voucher fight. I want to pick the fully funding public schools fight. I want to have a singular focus on making sure that when parents are choosing schools, they absolutely are choosing Wisconsin public schools because they are the best schools for their children. That's the vision we need to set out as the governor. Now, I will tell you, and as a state, now I will tell you the concern I have about the conversations we've had about public school funding, about healthcare, all of this costs a tremendous amount of money. And we have to grow our economy. Communities are struggling because they don't have economic opportunity in their communities. We are struggling because we have seen a decline in manufacturing across the state. We have seen farmers losing out. We are losing a dairy farm every day. We have to lean in. We have to recognize that the reality is we need more resources in this state. We have to grow. We can't turn our back on opportunities. We have to lean in and say, where can we find jobs? Where can we create jobs? Where can we attract businesses here? Where is the economy going? When I was secretary, we had the opportunity to build the clean economy infrastructure for the United States of America. That's what I want to do in this state. That's what I want to bring back to this state. Manufacturing and strong agriculture, those are the keys to our economy. They make up our economy. You all work in that economy. We all do, and we have to build that. That's how we pay for our public schools. And that's how we make our public schools, again, the #1 place, the only place where Wisconsin parents want to send their children.
Lieutenant Governor Rodriguez.
So I'm glad we have an opportunity to have this nuanced discussion, because it is hard with the yes or the no to talk about exactly what you'd like to be able to do. I am a product of public schools. My children both go to public schools right now. But as County Executive Crowley said, 50% of kids in Milwaukee are on a voucher today. If we shut that off tomorrow, it is not good for the child, it is not good for the community, and the Milwaukee public school system could not absorb them. So we're going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We're going to have to invest in our public schools while we make modifications to the voucher program. We need to change the formula for how we fund our public schools. Right now it is very categorical, and I'll give you an example as to why that's a problem. I was in Delavan. They went from a very small percentage of English language learners to a much higher percentage in a very short period of time. Not one extra dollar in school funding from the state. So that means they have to rob Peter to pay Paul to make sure these children get the education that they need. I am fully for 90% special education funding. I told you my mother was a teaching assistant for children with special needs and a proud union member. But we've also got to modify what we're doing on the voucher system. If you want public dollars, you're going to have the same standards as public schools, full stop. You can't have different standards within your schools. Additionally, we can make sure that the dollar follows the child. As of right now, if somebody's accepted into a voucher system and within a certain period of time, they decide that they cannot meet their needs and they push them back to the public school system, they keep the funding. That's got to stop. Secondly, we have to make sure that right now, once your child qualifies in kindergarten for a voucher program, you never, ever have to show how much you make ever again to see if you meet the income requirements. So right now, what the federal government is asking us to do is to check twice for public services, twice a year for things like Medicaid. Why are we allowing it for 13 years for children who are going to the voucher program?
Thank you. Your time is up.
Good.
Appreciate it. I want to take this opportunity here to draw things to a close here. We went right up to time and then some. Thank you for being with us through those technical difficulties, through all of those difficult questions. I want to appreciate all of you again for being up here on this stage again. Not everybody was able to make themselves available, and I would like to invite the audience at this point to applaud for the candidates for putting up with that. This is an imperfect process, but this is part of a long campaign where you guys will have the opportunity to dive more into the weeds, and I invite the audience to do more research on these candidates. You will be rewarded for doing so, I promise. In the lead up to this, there were a million more questions I wanted to get to that we just did not have the time for. Thank you all for your time, and please join to meet the candidates a little bit here after the fact if they have time to make themselves available, and then I think I have to turn it over to Evan here for the final goodbye.
Hello, testing. Okay, great. Can we just give a big round of applause to JT for this amazing moderation? Putting these questions together was a huge challenge, and JT as well as all of you who submitted questions were a big part of that. I'm so proud of the work we were able to do here. I'm so thankful to our candidates who had asked to answer some tough questions, and I think we all have a lot to chew on. Please take the time, if our candidates are available, to talk to them afterwards, get into some of the weeds a little bit, and come afterwards to the Cardinal and join us to celebrate our labor community, because it just makes me so proud to see all of these faces here in the crowd. Not every state does this. Not every city does this. Madison does it because our labor community is strong, and Madison is a union town.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Can you drop the mics off right away?
Yeah, drop the mics off, and then if you guys want to talk to people in the crowd, go ahead, do your thing. Appreciate it, guys.